Hello, everyone, and thank you again for joining us here at Leaders Uncut. It is today my great pleasure to have with us Pat Philbin, who is the President and CEO at Old Dominion Strategies, as well as of Crisis One. Hello, Pat. How are you doing today?
I'm well. Thank you for having me, Catherine.
Good. It's good to have you on the show. So, Pat, tell us about your background. I think that would be a great way to start this conversation. And then tell us what you're doing with your companies, particularly Old Dominion, but I'm sure there's a lot to talk about as well with Crisis One. So, if you don't mind starting there, that would be great.
Sure. So I spent a little bit more than 20 plus years in the U.S. Coast Guard. Much of that, my last half of that career was at the top of the organization. So I like leading teams. I like mentoring folks. The firms that I own and mentor tend to be service-disabled, veteran-owned small businesses. We are located in Northern Virginia, and our primary clients include federal government clients. So much of our work, although I've done some private sector work in development, leadership, crisis communication type work, my real passion is helping people succeed, recognizing that not everyone comes from the same cut, and it's really important that they own the motivation for wanting to succeed. So as it relates to the companies that you mentioned, we have a number of clients inside the Department of Homeland Security. We have clients over in other agencies, for example, IRS that we're supporting. And clearly now is an interesting time, obviously, with the change of the administration and having to be really agile and responsive to our clients who are under a significant amount of pressure with all of the requests that are being issued by those in the administration to get clarity on who is doing what inside the government. So I've also been inside the government as a Schedule C appointee, so I understand the need to get your hands around what's going on as you come into leading federal employees. And so I sort of bring an experience based not only in the military, but also having served some time in a prior administration, trying to understand what the folks are doing and how I can help make success possible.
Yeah, and I can imagine that it's critical to have this type of background in order to be able to properly advise the audiences that you're working with.
I certainly have a lot of empathy for what's going on here, yes. But one of the roles, for example, that I understood coming in as a Schedule C in a prior administration is to understand where we can improve operations, where we can improve efficiency and effectiveness. And so I saw that as my role. And I love helping build high-performing teams. So if there's one thing that really sort of gets me up in the morning is how can I help? How can I take a team and understand the strengths and weaknesses of each individual? And then how can we assemble them in a way that produces optimal outcomes, if you will?
That's critical. So I would imagine right now with everything that's going on, not only from, of course, a new administration, but we have also lots of new technologies that are coming at us at the speed of light that also have to be included in any type of strategic effort. So do you deal with this as the first question? And if you do deal with this, how do you approach this and how do you advise companies as far as preparing for the future?
Absolutely. So one of the things I have been long interested in is, while I'm no expert, how do you employ or identify the right technologies that can help accuracy, efficiency, effectiveness that could, at the end of the day, free people to do things that technology can't, right? So part of what I am always interested in is understanding people. And I think if I can understand the people part of this, then I can marry the right people with the right technology that we are trying to introduce into some of our government clients. And the challenge is, having been on the government side, some of the data challenges are the result of garbage in, garbage out. So either fields and data sets aren't completed properly or they're vacant. And then as you try and apply technology to understand what's going on, you're not getting as clear a picture of what's going on. And as a result, when you look to apply technology to solutions to things, it can be difficult. As one example, we were trying to help the Coast Guard modernize its financial management systems early on, back in the about 6 or 8 years ago, and just trying to clean the data in a way that would allow us to apply technology in order to migrate data sets as large as that, a bit of a challenge. And so I heard Elon Musk made a comment yesterday at the beginning of the cabinet meeting that the president was hosting, that the technology is really a challenge inside the federal space. And it is. My experience over the last 20 years trying to support federal clients is a lot of it is outdated, and they use very old versions of technology. And so as contractors, what we try to do is identify solutions and relationships. As one example, we just established a strategic partnership with Stony Brook University, looking at financial technologies, financial AI that might help government agencies, reach clean audits, for example, or understand where their money is going. And it is complicated. It's having some subject matter experts that work with me. The budget process is complicated, from identifying needs and then understanding what it actually costs to deliver those services.
I understand that, but I mean, my first question is, first of all, why are they so outdated as far as infrastructure is concerned? Because in a lot of cases, it is critical for security purposes, I would imagine. So that's the first question. Why is that? Is that a budget issue? Is that the fact that the administration is slow by nature to address any type of change like that? Or what's the main challenge here?
Well, so I think because the bureaucracies never ever seem to grow smaller, right? I mean, they, having served at FEMA many years ago, I was surprised to learn that when disasters happen, that oftentimes the federal coordinating office that was open to help facilitate getting aid to disaster victims often outlived the follow-up, the disaster assistance, long after it was no longer needed. But if you think about it, we're human, right? So when you set up a field office, for example, you hire people in some congressional district. And when you have to close that office in a congressional district, that is often challenged by the members who represent that congressional district. So it's just understanding that, any bureaucracy often will refuse to go quietly into the night, even though there may be a better, more efficient way to do what they do.
And that's the challenge, and this is why I'm sorry to interrupt you, because that's something that I still have a hard time understanding. I've always been in the private sector, and if in the private sector you adopt this type of attitude, behavior, response rate, time to response, you're dead. I mean, you cannot survive anything like that. So do you think it's something that has been established over time, that has become the norm, that the norm is now being challenged? I mean, why is it that they can actually do this? I'm still not totally understanding that.
I think it hurts. It hurt not having people in the office. It has accelerated the problem. So high-performing teams generally need to communicate often. And there is, in my opinion, personal accountability challenges in leading others. Unless you're in a military organization where accountability is clear. And so there's risk in making decisions. So if you're a federal employee, my experience in some cases was they were they were reticent to make decisions because that meant you had to be accountable, but nothing ever seems to happen. I mean, it just, somebody has always got another what about, so sometimes the 80% is good enough and then you fix it later. And so in the private sector, we have to move quickly. And that's what we do, or we don't survive. And in government service, you don't necessarily have to work quickly. So there clearly are some structural changes that I think should be made, quite frankly.
I think it's necessary because, you have job security. I would imagine if the private sector had this type of job security, no matter what you do, you can't be fired unless for extreme circumstances. It changes the whole behavior and that impacts the outcomes. And also, I really believe that if you don't make decisions, you have a chance to not make decisions, but it's more dangerous than making a decision in a lot of cases, because no decisions means anything can happen. And so what? Why are you even here?
No decision is a decision, right? Yeah. And so to me, most people in having studied decision making a bit, generally it is worse to wait to make the decision. Oftentimes your intuition will be right. So make a decision, and then if it's wrong, then you fix it. And we learn a lot by being wrong. And so I love hiring people who aren't afraid to take chances and calculated risks, because you learn a lot when you make mistakes. And I've made a lot of mistakes, and so but I'm not afraid. If you give a project or a challenge to a bunch of kindergartners and observe them from the distance, what you find is they often have a much better outcome than people who know a lot, because they don't let their biases get in the way. And so to me, it's almost having to untrain people who we hire, because they are accustomed to having very strict command and control with no ability to make decisions. In my view, the closer you can make a decision to the point of delivery of a service is probably going to be the best option, the best outcome. And I learned that in the Coast Guard, because I wasn't around much when I was on ships. And when I was in early, the telecommunications wasn't all that great. So if you were on a ship, you were deployed wherever, oftentimes you had to make decisions. And you had to understand, okay, decisions based on what? And if you make that decision based on the culture, the values of the organization that you're with, chances are you're going to do just fine. And so to me, part of our effort is to hire people who are consistent with the values and the cultures we have, who aren't afraid to make decisions. We allow them to make decisions, and we absorb the risk. And if they make mistakes, as long as it's not intentional or malicious, we'll walk through it and try and understand how they make decisions. Because in my view, if I can help develop a decision maker, that means they're not going to call me in the middle of the night.
Yes, that's so true. That is so true. But I think you are highly needed there. I really do believe that, Pat, because I think there's a huge need for private sector medicines to be injected into the public sector's habits here, because I see that as completely outdated in a lot of cases. And of course, now the administration is looking into this. But anyway, I'm not going to get into politics. This is not the goal here. But what's important is for you that you have that understanding, and it takes a certain level of intelligence in order to be able to detach yourself almost from everything you've learned and apply this also to the private sector, because then it becomes a win-win that is doable, where you provide that change management mindset that is really important nowadays, because you have to change no matter what, no matter where you are and what you do. So I see your role as a very important one right now.
Yeah, there's some great stuff written by Cy Wakeman on egos. And it is, having read much of her stuff, we employ a lot of what she advocates in terms of trying to remove your ego from situations and look to understand, especially the other's position, and really only strive for win-win kind of opportunities, and really try and help others be successful. But it doesn't, I grew up down in the South, and we were pretty civil down there, and continue to be. And if there's anything I miss, it's the civility in the South, where I grew up in Georgia, and you can have a conversation. You don't have to agree, and often you're just not disagreeable. So let's figure this out. Seldom does some one person own the decision or the solution, quite frankly. So I love solutioning with groups, and then managing or trying to help manage groups through that process, because just looking for cues. I mean, communication is more than 80% nonverbal.
Yeah.
So, I mean, put that in context of whether it's the education challenges we've had because of COVID, or no longer working in the office with our contracting folks, or program managers. I mean, you can tell when you're in a room whether or not somebody disagrees or agrees with you just by watching them.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes, very true.
So we've lost a little bit of that ability to do that.
Yeah, that is true. I mean, we've all had to adjust, whether you're in the private or the public sector. We all had to adjust to this new environment. And I think a lot of people that have been able to apply that self-discipline, this is where it makes a big difference, because not everybody has that aptitude, or I should say has acquired that aptitude, because you have to first of all understand the need for it, and then they have the ability to implement. Not everybody has that, right?
Right, absolutely. Virtual work environments and virtual teams require a special type of person to work, because they have to be highly motivated and highly solution oriented and highly open to working with others across the globe.
Yeah.
There are a lot of companies that do this really well, and that's one of our goals, is to try and reduce the cost to the government.
Yeah.
And identify talent maybe in lower cost areas, and as long as we can connect and we have the confidence that they can work virtually, and there are technologies that can help manage that. But we're all adults, so I'd rather identify up front the type of person that would fit well in our environments, and hire them and help develop, and then get out of the way, and then let them solve problems.
Yeah, I think that's key, is to understand who you are dealing with, and organize your team accordingly, because everybody is made of the same DNA.
Well, correct. They're not. Helping them understand what they're really good at is also a challenge, in my opinion. I love working with young people, because I don't think we pay enough attention to helping them understand or develop insight into what they're good at, what they're not good at. There's all kinds of assessments, psychographic assessments. We employ some of them that I think I have high confidence in, but having had the luxury of guest lecturing in university settings occasionally, they don't really think about those things and oftentimes it requires them to unplug, read, reflect, and then really understand what happens when they lose track of time. If you have an activity where you lose track of time, chances are that's something you're passionate about. Yeah. And when I get the chance to interview, I don't interview as much as I used to, but I'm more interested what a person does on the weekend and in their spare time, to give me a sense of what do you enjoy doing? Because if I can understand what their passion is, we build our development model around that. If I can help you make your resume stronger tomorrow than it is today, then I've created value for you and me, right? Because then you can help clients.
Yeah, it is. And I think what people do during the weekend or outside of office hours tells a lot about their personality and also their talent. If they do something, it's because they love it, and that's because they're probably good at it. So that has to be taken into consideration, right?
If you do what you're good at, you're going to get more pats on the back, you're going to get more accolades, you're going to have more fun, you're going to make more money. And sometimes I think we do people a disservice by not moving them on. Maybe it's not a good fit for us, and they're not happy doing the type of work. They just take the job for the money. And to me, especially, and this is, I think, where I may differ from many, but it's more than money. It's about more than money. And in the government space, that's a real differentiator. We have one of the higher retention rates in our employee base. In fact, my biggest competitor for our talent is the government. They take our people. I'm happy for them. And it means we have a friend likely, in the government space somewhere.
Yeah.
But it means we're doing something well if the government wants our people.
Yeah, no, that's very true. That's very true. Okay, that's fascinating what you're doing there. I think it's. Is your marketing making an impact? Are you reaching the right audience? Is your messaging truly connecting? Are you maximizing your return on investment? At Slice Marketing, we use AI-powered insights to fine-tune your targeting, optimize your messaging, design high-converting websites, and craft content that inspires, entertains, and educates, all to amplify your brand's impact. Sometimes a small adjustment can create big results. Let's chat, no strings attached. Email us at catherine.oaks@slicemarketing.com or visit our website. Tell us about Crisis One, because that also is very interesting.
Yeah, so it's interesting from a development perspective. I got involved in crisis communication early on when I was in the Coast Guard. In fact, one of my claim to fame is I was under the spaceship, the shuttle Challenger. I was commanding officer of a patrol boat when it blew up. And so it was sort of a trial by fire, but I think that's where I became very interested in communication and crisis communication. So I initially started my company doing crisis communication support type work with and technologies and working with communities. But then I realized that they were asking for other things other than crisis communication. And so Crisis One actually does more financial management systems work today and helping with the planning, program, budgeting, execution model. So Crisis One focuses a lot on federal financials. And that's where the bulk of the work is, looking at data integrity issues within the budget shops. And so many of the clients that we have on the Crisis One side are looking at financial management issues now, not really crisis communication, but it is catchy from a company name. So I didn't want to get rid of the name, as opposed to Old Dominion, where we acquired a company that was just emerging called Old Dominion Strategies a few years back, and then we have invested a great deal of energy focusing in on program management, financial management. We do a little bit of that, logistics. We help agencies do space facilities management type work. And so interestingly that, we have spent the last several years helping certain clients reduce the federal footprint. And then all of a sudden, they've gotten back to work orders. So we are trying to help them manage this accordion nature of, we're trying to help the government reduce, their spend on their footprint. And then all of a sudden, we now have had to shift quickly to figure out how do you work out an opportunity where they can either, we used to call it hot racking on ships, but how can you share space in the federal space when you have too many federal people and you don't have the space that you used to have. So it saves the government money. Clearly, if you have a workforce that doesn't have to be in every day, but they're motivated and they are employing systems that can track the work that they're doing, that's supporting the mission and vision of the leader. I think that's where sometimes we don't probably lend enough effort to clarifying what is it we're doing. And so you see, if you look across the government, there are agencies that have overlapping jurisdictions. That, there's an area that I can see where we're working on things. And because when I was in the Coast Guard, it happened during 9/11. And so not long after 9/11, it was clear to us at the senior parts that we were probably going to get asked to move to a different federal department. At the time, the Coast Guard was the Department of Transportation, so I had to look as one of the principal analysts on where would be a good fit. And as things began to coalesce around the Department of Homeland Security as a construct, uh, much of the mission was security and safety related, so that kind of made sense to me.
Right.
But here we are, trying to help some of the agencies reduce duplication of effort and get it, because if you have clarity about the mission, then you can look closer at accountability and responsibility, and all those things kind of flow from that.
It's sometimes, I mean, very often, more than sometimes, very hard to gain clarity when you live and breathe the same thing day in and day out. It's really hard to take a step back and have a bird's eye view on your situation and be fully authentic about it, right?
It is. And having been fortunate enough to work with some pretty senior executives through agencies, yeah, sometimes people are afraid to make recommendations for fear of the reaction in the team. So group dynamics is really important here. On the other hand, it's important to get everybody's ideas on the table, because at the end of the day in group dynamics, one of the things we practice is as soon as an idea leaves your mouth, you no longer own it. Okay, then it becomes the group. Okay, let's beat it up. Let's see what the risk and benefits are of a particular strategy. And so, again, managing group dynamics and really optimal decision making is kind of something that I really enjoy, because I tend to reserve things and watch and then try and help tweak and you have to listen though. And a lot of leaders today, I think, could use a little help.
You have touched a very important point. I always say you have to learn to listen. Yet I see so many people speak and speak and speak, and when you try to place a word, you can't even place a word because they speak constantly over you. So I think that quality of listening is critical, because first of all, you learn so much. You're really able to evaluate a situation when you listen and you pay attention to the details, because it's all about details. It's also about the intonation of voice that can express a sense of urgency, or maybe a certain anxiety on a specific area too, that maybe need to be more emphasized than others. So that quality of being able to listen, I think it is so important. I'm glad you're bringing that up, because I see so many leaders that are not able to do this.
Some of the folks that I have studied in leading organizations, their leaders often will be the last one to speak in the meeting. You know, there'll be an agenda, but they reserve the right. And I learned some valuable lessons about if you're the top person in a group, unwittingly, it influences how everybody else reacts.
Yes.
Right? And so if someone's not sure about whether or not they should say something, and you haven't created the parameters or environment where they feel safe offering an opinion that may be contrary to what the rest of the group is saying, chances are they won't. But even simple moves, behavioral moves, how people respond from a communication perspective can chill conversation. And I think that is one of the things that worries me most about organizational group dynamics, is that how do you avoid chilling the conversation, because you may miss some really great ideas and solutions when people feel intimidated from expressing their views.
You do, but don't you think that has to do with company culture? I mean, you have to have a culture that allows others or at any level to challenge. You have to challenge.
You do,
right?
And there's another book that I love called Radical Candor, and that's one of our sort of value, culture things. Is look, you have to one, no longer own an idea when you're in a group and you're trying to find a solution. But second, you have to have the confidence and understand that I'm going to protect you as the leader, but I want to know what you are thinking.
Yeah.
Otherwise, there's no need for a group.
Yeah.
If a leader is always going to be the first one to speak, and they're going to bias the group because they're going to say, well, I think we ought to do this, that in my view, the leader ought to be one of the last ones to talk.
I agree with you, but I think they're going to be forced to change because it may work for with, not work, not for. It may work with the older generations. The younger folks, they're not going to cope with that. I mean, and if CEOs or leaders do not change their culture, they're going to have a very big turnaround here because I can tell you that young folks, they want to be heard. And they want to be part of the deal. They want to have a voice. It's very important to them.
And I applaud that. I think that's wonderful because I realize I'm not very good at a lot of things, but they are. And so if I I want to know what they're thinking and how they would execute these things. And so to me, oftentimes someone once told me, he said, if you're not quite sure who the smartest person in the room is, best keep your mouth shut before you prove it isn't you, right? So, let's see who the smart people are in the room and figure it out.
That's so true. That's so true. I love it. Well, it's pretty obvious that you have what it takes to really improve, first of all, drive growth in any type of organizations and really work on efficiency and transformation that is now critical because people and companies have to learn to pivot very quickly.
They do, and we're learning that lesson daily over and over. But if you can create a learning organization, then you can be very agile, and if you attract the right talent, they will be very excited about working in certain environments like that. And those are the kind of people we certainly would love to have.
Agreed. Well, wonderful. So if someone is interested in speaking with you, what is the best way to get hold of you, Pat?
Probably my email. Because I generally, I will return a call, but if no one leaves me a voicemail, I'm happy to give you my cell number, 703-819-0457. Happy to have the conversation, but oftentimes I'm busy, but I do check my voicemail and I will get back to you. And the other is my email, which is jphilbin, JPHILBIN @odstrat.com, odstrat.com.
Perfect. We'll put this on the video. This way it will be easier for people to understand that. Great. Thank you. Appreciate that. So now I always ask my guests to share a story of resilience, of challenges that you had to overcome, what you learned from it, so that we can end this conversation on a very motivational and positive note. So what would that be?
Unfortunately, I have a lot to pick from, but I think one of the reasons I am an entrepreneur largely is because of my experience at that federal agency, FEMA, where something happened, not necessarily through my fault, because I was empowering people to do things, and somebody did something they shouldn't have done, and it caused me to lose a very coveted position, very senior in the government. And so I had to quickly pivot. I had kids in high school. And I think one of the things that it revealed to me was I call myself the canary in the coal mine, because all of a sudden AOL was my new homepage. The NBC Nightly News was all of a sudden focused on what I did, although I didn't. And now some of the it's just, and you realize who your friends are, I think, and those kind of things. And so to me, I don't hold grudges. I was disappointed in how the reaction, quite frankly, of some of my former bosses and peers. But I am reluctant a little sometimes to do social media, and I don't do social media, and largely because I think people who don't know me really don't understand, and so people opine about things for which they know nothing about, and rather than seek to learn or understand what happened, I spent weeks and months defending the agency for something that somebody else did, but I took the bullet for it, and that's okay. That's what leaders do, and I would do it again. But I think my biggest takeaway from that is don't always assume malicious intent, somebody's malicious intent on something that they do or say, because more often than not, it's probably very innocent what they said or they didn't understand. And so to me, being empathetic, sometimes people have bad days, sometimes they're span of control is really large, or they have failed at something. And again, I'm okay with failure because I've learned a lot. I mean, there are people that have learned a lot. The founder of JetBlue, you know,
Yeah.
he exited after a snowstorm. But he's running a wonderful airline, as I understand it, in South America now. So again, resilience is part of leadership, and it's part of making decisions and being accountable. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with making decisions, and we'll see what happens. I'll make it based on the judgment of sort of being a high learner. I'm terribly curious about most everything in the world, to the dismay of my wife, because she's like, "Can you just stop asking so many questions?" You know, but I like learning. So.
I love it. I love it. Well, you just shared a great story of emotional intelligence, because I think that makes a big difference with whatever happens in life. Because like you say, sometimes people have weak days, or maybe something happened in their private life that influence their job or their decision making. So we are not perfect. We all make mistakes. We all have ways in life that are forcing us to reinvent ourselves. It happens all the time. And I think in a way, and not in a way, for me anyway, it's always been a positive thing, because at the time it doesn't feel positive. It feels like, why me? Why do I have to deal with this, right? But then you look back and you realize, oh my God, thank God for that event. It changed my life for the better. Now you have a company, right? You have all Dominion strategies. You're helping companies. Maybe you would not have done that had that event not happened. So that's also a different way of looking at it.
I'm eternally optimistic, and that is how I look at life. You know?
Yeah.
One door closes, another one opens up. It's not
there we go. Thank you so much. It was wonderful to have you on the show today. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, everyone, thank you for watching this video, and I would love it if you would share this video on your networks, because we all need exposure. You know, a lot of people may need the services that Pat is offering right now with both of his companies, and it's a time of change where we have to learn to pivot very quickly. We have to learn to embrace all these new technologies that are coming on board, because we are here for a reason. We cannot just think it's a thing that it's a fad that we've heard for the internet. The internet was a fad, by the way, by many people. Look at where we are now and what we would be without the internet. So I think we are at a critical time of evolution of our planet, of our society, that we need to embrace, and we need people like Pat to help us out. Do just that. So make sure to share on your networks. I would appreciate it. And subscribe to the channel, and we will see you next time.